So again, good evening. We've got a presentation and then invite questions as we go through. So what I'm going to start to do is start sharing my screen. It tells me I'm sharing my screen. I'm not convinced I am actually. Try again.
That's coming through now.
Right. Go back to the beginning. It's always a good place to start. So, Somerset Bus Partnership. We have 12 bus groups across the county. We have 150 bus champions, and we've held over 100 bus stalls this year and taught to literally tens of thousands of bus users. And it's based on all of that consultation that we bring you our point of view this evening. What we have been made aware, and I think everyone on this call would agree, is that for Somerset, buses are a really important issue. And the very good news is that our MPs think that. Anna Sabine, Anna is the MP for North East Mendip and Frome. Anna Sabine was given a 3-minute slot on Channel 4 for a topic of her choice, and she chose to talk about rural buses, and particularly Somerset rural buses and bus franchising. She's a Lib Dem MP, as is Sarah Dyke, who used to be the Lib Dem MP for Frome, but she's now a very, very active Lib Dem MP for Somerton and Glastonbury. And she not only has been raising the issue of public transport, both rail and buses, but she actually got a whole day debate in the House of Commons on improving public transport and particularly rural transport. In that debate, she did say that Somerset has the worst bus services in the country, a statement which was echoed by Taunton's MP, Gideon Amos, in a question he raised in the House of Commons. He's brought up the issue of Somerset's buses on 2 occasions in the past month. And he, like Sarah and Anna, have all praised the work of Somerset Bus Partnership, which resulted in the Transport Minister saying, "It sounds like the Somerset volunteers are doing a cracking job. I'm very happy to congratulate them." So we take that comment with some pleasure. But it's not just those 3 MPs who've been talking about buses. Linda Snelling, who leads our Yeovil bus group, and I are going to be meeting Adam Dance in the new year to talk buses. I met with Ashley Fox in Bridgewater about a month ago. David Northey, who's one of our management team members, has been liaising very heavily with Rachel on bus matches in the Tiverton and Milverton area, and Rosa is in touch with Tessa Munt. What we are seeing is much greater involvement with all the recently elected MPs on bus issues. So that's very encouraging news, and we'll come back to the issue of those MPs as we go through the evening. I think the reality, and it's worth doing an update, as we haven't really spoken since the middle of the year, is that research from Channel 4, and they're not alone in this, has shown that bus provision has decreased by getting on for a third since 2011. So in the last 20 odd years, bus usage has gone down by just around a third. Hit very, very hard by COVID, and we've recovered from COVID, but we're still running at below the pre-COVID levels. There was significant action by the Conservative government. They put £3.5 billion into buses, both to support BSIPs and to help bus companies and bus users survive the COVID downturn. But probably most innovatively, they introduced the £2 fare across England, which has had such a good impact on bus users. And at our bus stalls, we continually get told how it's such an important, has been such an important feature of bus travel this year. What the Channel 4 report also said is that the loss of services isn't flat across the country. It's been particularly prevalent in rural areas, including of course, here in Somerset, where for the first 8 or 9 years of my experience of bus campaigning, I started doing that in 2014, we were dealing with cuts to bus services. I'm glad to say more recently there have been a lot fewer cuts and there have been significant enhancements in bus services. But it is rural areas which are suffering most. And it's interesting to note that rural bus service users, on average, travel 47% further compared with those in urban areas, which is not surprising. I mean, getting from Yeovil to Taunton is quite a long journey. Getting from the outskirts of Bath into the centre of Bath, it isn't a long journey. Um, and that's where the £2 fare has had such a hugely beneficial impact on rural bus services. It really has significantly cut the cost of travelling by bus. Yes, it's now going up to £3, but the flat rate fare is absolutely vital for rural bus services and for passengers in rural bus services. What is also a reality is that local transport authorities in urban areas invest much more per head than rural transport authorities in rural areas. And in rural areas, per head, it's about half the investment that you see in uh, urban areas. And if we actually look at this chart, which shows our neighbouring rural transport authorities, you will see that Somerset is about half the average. Somerset is one of the lowest supported bus areas in the country, which is why, of course, Sarah Dyke and um, Gideon Amos can say that our bus services are some of the, if not the most worst rated in the country. We need to see more investment in buses in Somerset, and indeed, two-thirds of the councillors who were elected 3 years ago didn't commit to actually increasing the amount of subsidy for Somerset's bus services. Unfortunately, the financial problems facing Somerset haven't been able allowed them to sustain that commitment or deliver on that commitment. But that's why we do need our MPs to campaign, as in fairness they are, for Somerset bus buses. I think Somerset's buses have been more often raised in Parliament than any other area of the country. Anyway, let's track back to July the 4th, Independence Day in the United States, and we had a general election on that day. And it was a remarkable turnaround. If we go back to 2017 and 2019, you see an awful lot of blue. But in 2024, even though the popular vote didn't swing anything like as dramatically as the way the seats did, there was a lot of red. It was a very big victory for Sir Keir Starmer's Labour government, and so we can expect to have Labour in power certainly for the next 5 years, possibly, who knows, for longer. But here in Somerset, we mostly went Lib Dem. A lot of Conservative seats fell to the Lib Dems. The Bridgewater seat was held by Sir Ashley Fox for the Conservatives, but the rest of the Somerset Council area of Somerset is now Lib Dem. To the north of us, we have some Labour seats in northeast Somerset, but there is a lot of yellow or Lib Dem orange across the southwest now. But Sir Keir Starmer was elected. It's not been the easiest of rides. I think the past 4 months have been a very troubled time for Labour. But it's appropriate to see him in front of a bus because buses are a very key part of Labour's policy. So let's look at Labour's policy and plans for better buses because they are determined to take this forward. They have set a path, and one hopes it's one that we in Somerset can benefit from. Louise Haigh, who for the first few months was Transport Minister, having been Shadow Transport Minister for many years, buses are the lifeblood of our communities, but for too many people, it has become impossible to rely on local services. And I'm sure we all could say that about Somerset's buses, as routes have been slashed and timetables have been hollowed out. And it's particularly in Somerset, the reliability of our bus services, which have proved such a problem and such a barrier to many people choosing to rely on buses. The key part of Labour's strategy on buses is bus franchising. Labour argue that they will deliver a bus revolution. And the decision for Somerset is whether they want to go along with Labour's approach on buses and be part of it or not. It is their flagship policy, even though even today the details are only very slowly beginning to emerge. But it is the way that they have indicated they want to go. And importantly, particularly as we have so many Lib Dem MPs, boosting bus services by giving local authorities more powers to franchise services and simplifying funding is the Lib Dem approach on buses. So the Lib Dems here in Somerset and Labour nationally are both committed to bus franchising. It is the way that the bus industry is going to go for as long as Labour and the Lib Dems have an influence over it. Data has shown that it's a popular measure too. Simon Lightfoot, who is the buses minister, has said all local transport authorities, not just those in mayoral combining authorities, will be able to explore franchising. And exploring franchising is what we're inviting Somerset to do. Somerset Bus Partnership would like to see bus franchising, but we need to encourage our unitary councillors now to start to look at it and look at it constructively. It's time to start a dialogue in Somerset about franchising. It's not been one which we've held up until now, but we now want to put it on the table, and one of the purposes of this meeting this evening was to say it is now time to start to talk about it. And the new Transport Minister Heidi Alexander is set to introduce Labour's Buses Bill later this month. She's on a very tight timetable if she's going to get it out before Christmas, but that's what it's scheduled to be. And so we might see news of exactly what Labour is proposing in the next month. So, just on the issue of bus franchising, is there anything that anybody would like to say at this stage? Just trying to lose my... There we are. Rosa.
Well, I hoped that would be some of the other people putting their hands up. But
Okay.
as you know, I'm a very avid supporter of franchising, if only to give some of the other bus companies a way into Somerset to give us some more rural small buses to connect communities to the main interurban routes. We need more buses that aren't commercially viable, and we understand that. And hopefully, franchise will allow us to uh, use a different way of funding our bus network.
Hello, can anyone hear me?
Who's that?
It's Paul Stevens.
Go ahead, Paul, please.
Unfortunately, I've lost my picture and I can't get it back of me. If it's any help to you, my actual position is railway operation and timetabling specialist franchising. So I know quite a bit about franchising in transport, which there's two ways of doing it, or several ways. The main concern that gets me with it is, first of all, is the government throwing everything at the county council and pretending it's nothing to do with the government, and trying to not get dirty hands with it? And will the DfT be involved or not?
I think we're waiting to see what the Buses Bill says. And until we see what that bill says.
From what I've seen, there's franchising and there's concessions as well, isn't there? And different counties are going in different directions.
Well, at the moment, we've only got a couple of
the other thing with
authorities doing it, but it's what the Labour government has said is that they want all local transport authorities to look at it and to see if they can introduce it, because they see it as a much better way than the current enhanced partnership, which isn't a very successful model.
The other thing which worries me considerably is this merging together or amalgamating of Wiltshire, Dorset, and Somerset, because both Dorset and Wiltshire are not really proactive bus counties, are they?
Well, parts of Wiltshire have been, Dorset less so, I agree.
Well, the only part of Wiltshire you can say successfully is Swindon.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't have to be that
geographically.
Transport authorities. The suggestion has been put that we could be part of, if WECA choose, and to date, and the current mayor, they haven't chosen to do so. But if WECA chose to go for bus franchising, then we could be part of that scheme. So it could be different from the three.
The other thing which I also find with it is, you get a county like Devon, for example. Historically, Somerset is closer to Devon than it is to anywhere else. And Devon is a really proactive council with regard to transport. Whereas the West of England mayor's area, as we'll call it, they seem to be, shall I say, without being biased or anything, Wells seems to be very interesting to them because it's a very nice place to be, and people in Wells tend to be more associated with Bristol rather than the rest of Somerset.
Okay, Paul, thank you. Thank you. Let's go to Stephen.
Hello there. Okay, yeah, everyone's talking about the franchising at the moment, but one concern I have, what if if your local authority changes to a franchising agreement opposed to enhanced partnership? Is there any provision or any stipulation within the rules that say there has to be an improvement over the current situation of an enhanced partnership? For example, if there is the same amount of services that are running under a franchise and there's no difference, what is the real benefit? So is there any stipulation within the rules that say there has got to be some improvement and there's got to be more services, and basically local people can have a greater say on what those services are?
Well, that's the thinking behind it, that it will provide improved services and that local people will have a greater say in it, and that the DFT will have to approve any franchising proposals. So I'm not sure that they would necessarily approve something which wasn't going to deliver benefits. Alan Peters, I'm sure you've got some interesting views on bus franchising.
I put my hand up to contradict slightly what Rosa said in actual fact, and that is her belief that franchising would open the door for other operators to come in and take up services. That in Manchester has not been the case. In Manchester, there were, I think, 3, maybe 4 major group operators in the area who each have taken a chunk. There were a number of smaller operators, and when I say smaller, maybe 30 odd vehicles, not one single one of which has actually won any franchise service. And SME operators throughout the country view franchising on that system, although there are different systems, apparently, although that's the only system that we've got to work from, with some fear, because there are good operators in the area. In our area, you've got Libra, you've got through minibuses, you've got Southwest Coaches, all of which, if they franchise the entire service in one batch, would not be able to cope with it, and therefore would not be able to bid. Another point is the cost of bidding is phenomenal. Similar to the cost of railway franchising, there is so much, even for a bus service tender now, you've got to fill in a 200-page pre-tender document, with such things of your how many apprentices you employ, which for an operator like me, I'm adding an apprentice ever, because we've never had more than 3 or 4 employees. There is so many things that you fall down on. It's very difficult for SMEs to actually cope. And what I fear would happen with a Somerset tender is that First would win it all because they're the only one with any garages. Manchester, for instance, bought the depots and buses from most operators and then put them out to tender, although it's not really clear what buses belong to who and what belong to Greater Manchester, to be perfectly honest. There's buses that are transferred from one operator to another, and depots, and then new buses that are allegedly bought by Greater Manchester the cost of franchising is phenomenal. And whilst, yes, in a place like Manchester, where you had a numerous operators in the first place, to an extent it works. You look at London, where franchising effectively has always been, because it was always exempt from deregulation. There is no small operator left in London. It's all big group companies, and they're the only ones who can afford to go through the process.
Thanks, Alan. Point made, and
Yeah.
I'm sure it's going to be an issue which will be raised now that the Labour government plans to extend franchising well beyond just the combined authorities to local transport authorities like Somerset, where undoubtedly smaller bus operators play a very, very key role, and how they're going to be integrated into a franchising system is clearly something which will have to be addressed. David Redwell.
Yeah, all I was hoping, Peter, we'd have an answer tonight, but the white paper on devolution is not being published now till next week. Fingers crossed. But franchising will only go to mayoral combined authorities. And as you say, we got two choices. One's going to be Somerset goes with the rest of Somerset, the north. That's North Somerset and Baines. Or it goes with this Wessex authority, or it goes into Wecker. I think that's basically where we are. But Somerset is too small as a, well, the unitary bit of Somerset, the county, consists of 3 unitary councils. But we are waiting for the government's direction on it. And then they definitely will insist on a mayor. That's been some of the hustle and bustle, but the mayor seems to be the way they want to go. If you go with a mayor, then you get more money, more powers. Devon, which has now gone into a combined authority with Torbay, but not Plymouth, now has franchising powers if it wishes to use them as part of its devolution agreement. And of course, Cornwall's got them and held them in reserve in terms of negotiations with First Group and Go Ahead. Only one will say to Alan, there is Metroliner that's gone into Greater Manchester, which wasn't there before. That's Comfy to Glow, the people who run Scottish CityLink and Megabus. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be very difficult in a rural area because you do have to buy all of First Group's assets, effectively any of Stagecoach assets, and possibly we'll also have to buy South West Coaches assets, which are a bit bigger group than, but not a large national group. So yeah, I think the issue at the moment will be with this government is to work on with enhanced quality partnerships where the government wants to set standards and make sure that services are delivered. I mean, we've got just about 6.5 million in Somerset and only 13 million in Wecker and 4.5 million, as Rosa knows, in North Somerset. So it's not a huge amount of money to carry the BSIP over. The most important thing for this group this year will be to make sure those bus service improvement plan bus services and the cross-border stuff, which of course, Peter, yours is the D2 X and the 376, 375, 374, which are jointly funded between Wecker and Somerset at the moment, and the 126, which is dear to Rosa's heart, who was lobbying away with me with Hannah Young, the North Somerset executive member, about keeping that running. So I think that's going to be where we are in the short term, getting Taunton bus station working, getting Yeovil bus station underway, getting better passenger information at Bath bus station with a new environment hub.
Hey, David.
Some of the shortcut and improvements in Wirral. But the big decision you talk about, I think, is a couple of years away, and then we'll know where they're going to go with it. But that's really my summary anyway.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much. Tim, your hand was up. Are you always like to listen to your comments too?
Well, it's got to a stage where I didn't really want to prolong this discussion much further, really. But I was just going to say, really picking up from Peter's point earlier on, or Paul, I think actually, is really that franchising is good I think, in principle, but on the ground in Somerset, I don't really have any confidence in Somerset Council to actually do franchising effectively we've seen the graph of how little they're prepared to invest in buses compared to neighbouring authorities. They don't seem to monitor the quality of the subsidised bus services that they're supporting at the moment. Their approach to information and promotion of public transport is terrible. They don't have many staff in the public transport section to take on a big project like franchising. And I'm not really convinced from their in-house operation that they're a sort of beacon of excellence when it comes to thinking about how bus services could be run as best as possible. So I don't want to be a wet blanket on it, but I really think that it would be better to put our energies locally into improving the services we've got rather than trying to kind of find a whole new structure and go down the franchising route at this point.
Well, if we take David's comment that we've got a couple of years, let's work on the enhanced partnership over the next 2 years. A lot of work needs to be done, and then look at bus franchising. A final comment from Susan, and then we'll move on. Susan.
Yes, I don't agree with what Paul said about Wells being sort of it is central Somerset. It's the only city in Somerset, and the fact that everything seems to be going to Wells as a hub plus street as well, I think is really very good. And I it's a pity that there's not sort of longer journeys like to the east and the west, because they're sort of going north south. But even so, it's definite improvement. What I also wanted to say, what Tim mentioned about the Somerset staff, the things that they put on there that comes up on Facebook that I notice about advertising stuff to do with buses, they don't know anything about buses, because they put things up about, oh, you go on to this and then you can find out everything. Well, it's when you click on it, it's only First Bus. And I put a comment there. I said, well, look, what about all the other bus services? So they haven't got a clue. So I would agree that, yes, it's not going to be in the right hands or people that seem to know what they're doing.
Okay, Susan, thank you.
Thank you.
In fairness to the Somerset officers who are Somerset Bus Partnership works a lot with, as Tim rightly says, they are understaffed, but the officers we have, I think, are very committed to the task. They work very hard, they're very professional, they're very responsive to any issues we raise with them, but there is a lack of resource there, and certainly if we were to go down the franchising route, we would need to see significantly more resource put in. Okay, let's move on.
Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Sorry, I don't seem to have a hand up facility. Could I just have a word?
Yes, go on, please. Who are you? Tell us who you are.
Ian McCulloch should be there somewhere.
Yep.
Okay, well, anyway, I just want to check a few things. The new Act, Labour, introducing this month sometime, that's going to supersede the 2021 Act? Or is it, adding on to it?
Well, we're waiting to hear what the Busues Bill, which is due to be out this month, whether they'll manage to get it out before Christmas, we'll have to wait and see. Everything is going to be inside that Busues Bill, and it hasn't been trailed very much up until now what the detail is.
But will the 2021 Act remain in force, or will the new bill supersede it? I mean, the 2021 Act did go some way to addressing the issue of franchising.
Well, they limited it to combined authorities initially, and it had to be approved by the DFT. We assume that they're going to extend it to a wider number of combined authorities, but still will be subject to approval by the DFT before any franchising scheme will be allowed to take place.
And do we have any idea of the sort of figures involved? I mean, talked about prohibitive costs. Do we know how much? Are we talking about $500,000, $250,000, you know?
Well, clearly the pioneer, Manchester has had, because they have been a pioneer, has had to very heavily invest to introduce bus franchising. It is anticipated that the setup costs will be much reduced by the plans that the government will put forward, but we wait to hear what those plans are. So we've been exploring this ahead of what's going to be the reality. The reality will be the Buses Bill, which Labour has promised to get out this year. With the change in Transport Minister, that there may be a hiccup in that, but if it's not out this month, we'll certainly see it in January. And I think the wish of Somerset Bus Partnership is that we then start to seriously consider it as an option for Somerset. Actually, this morning I got an invitation by Padam, who's one of the major bus transport consultancies, inviting me and anybody else who wishes to go along to a seminar on redesigning rural bus networks. Can franchising work in rural areas? It's taking place next month. It is an issue which is going to be talked about and very greatly explored before it becomes a potential reality for Somerset. Okay, let us try and move on. Try again. There we are. So the £2 fare, unlike the Conservatives and the Lib Dems, who in their manifestos promised to extend the £2 fare at least through 2025, and the Conservative case throughout the entire life of the current government, Labour made no similar commitment. And sadly, the £2 fare comes to an end at the end of December, so the end of this month. And in fact, the Somerset Bus Partnership, who put up literally thousands of these decals on bus shelters throughout the county, would welcome any help that anybody on this call can give to take down those decals by the end of this month. It's a challenge we take on. And we will have a new decal, a £3 fare, which is a 50% increase in cost of bus fares, but is still a flat rate fare. And a flat rate fare is such a huge bonus for rural bus users, because if we went back to normal commercial fares, we would see much higher fares in Somerset. So flat rate fares is certainly an issue that we would want our Somerset MPs to keep fighting for and arguing and trying to ensure that they will continue not only throughout the entirety of 2025, which is the current plan, but that a flat rate fare, if not £3, something akin to £3, will continue beyond into 2026 and onwards. So We've got the £3 fare, but it is only to the end of 2025. That's the Labour government's view. So we need our MPs, and they've all been very active on buses to battle in the House of Commons, arguing the case for Somerset and for the continuation of the flat rate fare. So we now come on to BSIPs. This is money that the government gives to local authorities, local transport authorities, to help support their bus services. And we've been the recipient of BSIP grants from government, and we've been quite successful in Somerset in getting grants from government, whereas many local authorities have in the past not got any. Somerset has been successful. In terms of the 2021 award, Somerset commissioned they were given £100,000 to spend on consultants to advise them what they should ask for. And the consultants came up with a staggering figure of £165 million we needed to bring up Somerset's bus services to the right, correct level of delivery. Well, we didn't get 165 million, we got 11.9 million, which was still a significant sum of money which we could do something with. But as Gideon Amos said to Louise Haigh when we got the very latest award, which was a much more generous award, thank you very much, but we in Somerset need a lot more. And because of the state of buses in Somerset, we really do need more money than we're currently getting. But that 11.9 million, which was to cover 3 years, not just 1 year, but 3 years, it was decided by the outgoing Conservative administration and endorsed by the incoming Lib Dem administration that it would be good to focus it on one area and really try and deliver significant improvements. And so Taunton was the beneficiary. They became Somerset's bus town, and the vast majority of that award was spent on Taunton introducing a £1 fare, significantly improved evening bus services, which Gideon Amos is a user of, and capital funds to improve bus lanes and provide the new Taunton Mobility Hub, and to introduce the Somerton DDRT scheme. It is interesting that whilst the revenue elements of the scheme can be quite quickly directed and indeed spent, the capital elements have been much slower to deliver, and neither the bus lanes nor the new Taunton Mobility Hub, which most of us might call a bus station, have yet to come to fruition. And the DfT have had to give special permission to extend the term of the award to allow the work to come through. It's been in part held up by the shortage of staff and some key members of the Somerset staff leaving, but it is in the pipeline, and hopefully we will see the benefits. Taunton in particular will see the benefits in the not too far distant future. So that was what we've been awarded to date. We'd just been told, or we were told a couple of months ago, that Somerset has had a significant award of 6.9 million, and this is just for 1 year. So that's 70% more per annum than we had with the previous scheme. So there's a lot more we can do, not as much as we might like to do, but a lot more we can do with this money than we could do with the old BSIP. There is, of course, a financial crisis in Somerset, which hovers over everything that happens. This has got implications for bus funding. It is possible that Somerset Council, who is trying desperately, and we must support them in their struggle to try and avoid going bankrupt, declaring a Section 112 order, which would almost certainly mean that Somerset's funding of buses would get cut if such an order was given. But even if the current council chose to look for savings in bus funding, though it's only a modest budget, but if they chose to, compared with other local authorities, if they chose to cut bus funding, the government has said that if bus funding is cut, then the new BSIP award would get withdrawn. So there would be a huge penalty for Somerset to cut its bus funding. So we very much hope that they don't and that they maintain it and that we will get the new funding award which has been given to Somerset. So we in the Somerset Bus Partnership have been looking at the BSIP award. The government has yet to lay down any guidelines as to how it should be spent, and the DfT, when they gave us the award 3 years ago, did make it quite clear that a very significant proportion of the award would have to go on bus priority measures, slow to deliver, slower even to deliver benefits, but that was the policy of the government. And the frustrating thing is we got that award of £12 million, but we actually haven't seen the effect of the very significant sum which was allocated to bus lanes because they haven't yet been put into place, principally in Taunton. So we've looked at the award and we've got the benefit that when we have our bus stalls, and we've run 100, as I've said before, we do not just give out bus timetables, so that's the main function. We do talk to people about what they want from their buses. We also talk to our bus champions. We also talk to unitary councillors. And importantly, we talk to our 12 bus groups in most of the towns in Somerset and hear their feedback as to what should happen to their buses. And on the basis of all of that consultation, we have developed our own proposal. And there are two sections to the award that the government has given us. There's a capital award and there's a revenue award. So looking first of all at the capital award, we need a new bus station in Yeovil. Yeovil, our second largest town, has been undergoing the fairly traumatizing effect of the Yeovil refresh, which has caused a lot of disruption in the town of Yeovil, caused a lot of problems for buses. The whole area around the bus station is being currently in the process of being pulled down, and there is a need for whatever the new refresh Yeovil is going to be to have a new bus station there. So a very significant part of that capital spend as it went on a mobility hub in Taunton, yet to be finished, yet to be built, was proposing would go on the desperate need for a new mobility hub in Yeovil. We also are great believers in decarbonisation in electric buses, and so we're proposing town bus services in Frome, in Yeovil and in Wells, so that the introduction of electric bus town services in those three important towns in Somerset. We also are suggesting that we need to have a clear identity for buses and also a bus operator map, relatively modest sums of money in truth, and the setup costs for a multi-operator ticket, again, very, very modest sum of money. So that's the capital budget. The bulk of it is going on the Yeovil bus station and electric bus services for 3 of our key Somerset towns. Now we come on to revenue. And the first item, which accounts for £1.5 million, so over half of the, or thereabouts half of the total revenue budget, is essentially to carry on supporting all the bus services, like in Taunton, like, for example, the Frome to Bath D2 evening services, many of the town services, the Somerset DDRT, all those services which are currently funded will continue to be funded. But we've got more money, so now we can do even more in supporting more bus routes. So looking at Yeovil, where there is, as I've said earlier, a real need, and I think that's recognised across the county. Yeovil has really suffered and saw bus cuts at a time when Taunton was seeing bus improvements. Yes, we'll hold on to those bus improvements in Taunton, but what we now need to see is improvements in Yeovil, and we're recommending a series of improvements, and also a cross-border service into Dorset, improvements to the CR6 Yeovil to Bridport service. So Yeovil needs to be an important beneficiary, but so does Bridgwater. Bridgwater is going to be a real economic dynamo for Somerset and for the wider area beyond Somerset, with the new gigafactory going into Bridgwater, and it's important that we upgrade a much needed upgrade of bus services in Bridgwater. And then looking at Taunton and mainly west of Taunton, the restoration of the pre-2024 bus timetable for the 25, and financial support for a new service Monday to Saturday daytime connecting Wiveliscombe with Wellington, a significant new route, and the restoration of the pre-2022 timetable for the number 6. Another new bus service we're suggesting should be funded is the Glastonbury community bus service linking Glastonbury to Castle Carry rail station. The bus services to Castle Carry rail service station are not fit for purpose, and this is one of the initiatives we would like and are proposing. And finally, some improvements to the 162 and 184 services from Frome to Shepton Mallet and to Midsummer Norton. This is in response to Colford Parish Council's lobbying. Colford Parish Council is the largest parish council in the Mendip area, and they have a very poor bus service, no bus services on Saturdays, and there is a real and desperate need for this town to connect to nearby Shepton Mallet, Midsummer Norton, Radstock and Frome, of course. Improvements to the 126, real battle royal has been fought over the 126. It's not totally within the control of Somerset Council because it's jointly funded with North Somerset Council. And then some revenue spending to allow a bus network plan map and promotion to leisure travellers, because Somerset is a tourist destination, relatively small sums of money. So that's the proposal we've put to Somerset Council, who are still awaiting guidance from the DFT, and that could influence the proposals we've just announced this evening. They're working on proposals. Richard Wilkins, who I was talking to this morning, he was complaining that we have sent out a mailing that probably about a third of you so far have received. The rest of you will be getting it over the next 24, 36 hours, inviting you, if you support our proposal, to contact Richard. He's been flooded, he tells me, with messages of support for our proposals. So we've sent this out to 1,000 people. Quite clearly, a lot of people are agreeing with these proposals. Would anybody like to comment on them? Very happy to hear any comments. Anybody from Somerset? Tim Andrews.
Thank you, Peter. Yes, just some initial reactions, really. I feel there's nowhere near enough on information, promotion, publicity for buses in your proposals. You put some very, very small sums in, which should be much bigger. You put in your slides, you made it clear that the first tranche of BSIP money was almost entirely spent in Taunton. I think that means that they've had enough, quite frankly, and there shouldn't be any money prioritising this next round for Taunton. So your item 9 about reinstating some service in Taunton, I think it shouldn't be on that list. My frustration with the first round of BSIP was that our BSIP in Somerset, had this great idea of this strategic core network of at least an hourly service between the main settlements in the county, and yet there were no actual spending proposals in the first round that actually achieved any of that. So I would like to see us putting that forward. And if Yeovil's the focus, then I suppose the Yeovil to Taunton route might be an obvious one to enhance to hourly, as would the Yeovil to Chard route. And I think that, making that happen so we have a proper clock face, reasonably frequent service that's going to start attracting new passengers is where we should be going in terms of a bigger picture for our county. And I think that an improvement to the frequency, coupled with better vehicles, bus shelters where they're needed, real-time information along the route, and bus priority measures where they're needed, I think we need to aim for to create really high quality routes that are going to start attracting people. That is not going to be cheap, and it does mean that other parts of the county aren't going to get improvements as quickly as they otherwise might. But I think we've got to be really strategic about this. My parish in Kingsbury Episcopi, we have one bus service on a Thursday, plus the college and school services. That's all. So, and I'm not advocating that any money be spent in my parish. I would like to see, high quality core network serving the main settlements in our county. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Trevor, you're on mute at the moment, Trevor.
I live in Wiveliscombe, and I suppose Wiveliscombe might be seeing us coming into the sort of Taunton part of the county. We certainly did not benefit from the 2021 BSIP settlement. The 25 service to Wiveliscombe suffered major cuts from 2000, well, certainly from 2011 onwards. And and the campaign that we ran in last year to save the 25. Yes, the service was saved, but the new service, the new timetable that first put in place, did involve some cuts and an altogether much more dysfunctional timetable, which made it even more difficult to encourage people to use the service. So I think money going to restore the timetable that we had in 20 that was in we had before 2024 just gets us back to what was already what was already then a pretty unsatisfactory situation. But it is very welcome because the new timetable that was put in place last year has really made it very difficult to keep even more difficult to keep the service going. And the other point I'd like to raise, obviously, is to welcome the fact that the Wellington Wivey route is listed amongst your possible proposals. And I would like to make it say that that is not altogether a new service. I mean, it was an old service that was cut by First more than 10 years ago now. It's remembered with great enthusiasm by people who used to rely on that service. So, yeah, it's a new service, but actually it's the restoration of what was in the past a very popular and important service to many people in Wiveliscombe and Milverton. That was all I wanted to say, really.
Thank you, Trevor. I know the discussions you've had with our consultants who've been working on this, they've found it really useful talking to you and to the Wellington Bus User Group. You've explained your case very, very effectively, which is why we've put it on the list. David Redwell.
My point is about Yeovil is you'll have to get agreement. This government's going to be very strict on making sure that Somerset, because it's working towards combined authorities. Just one thing, Peter, it's the devolution bill that will set up all these new authorities, not the Buses Bill or the Britain's Railways Bill. That's all I want to say there. But the ones in the north, to Radstock and Midsummer Norton, they will require WECA approvals or WECA discussions. The extension of 376 down through to Yeovil will require a discussion with the WECA officers and with the mayor and the combined authority board. I'm sure it'll go through because the 374, 375 did, but you'll need, I mean, Rosa knows the way around the north of the county of Somerset, but it will need lobbying in those directions to make sure it won't just be a Richard Wilkins decision. That's what I want to warn people. And we have to get, Rosa's quite good at this, getting Dan Norris on board, or wherever his new lady, man, or whatever political colour the new mayor is. And of course, we have to get Hannah Young, anything going into North Somerset. I mean, actually, Bath's the biggest city in Somerset. And the reason I make that point is the government guidance is going to be quite clear. You have to serve hospitals, schools, shopping centres and leisure facilities. Now, if you're in Sedgemoor, as it used to be, your hospital is actually Weston-super-Mare. If you're in your area, Peter, your major hospital is Bath and Bristol. So all those things will be taken into account when the mapping comes from the DFT. I'm not sure that you'll be able to buy new electric buses out of the grant. It's only 6 million. It won't go that far. And remember, as the gentleman who I agree with from Wiveliscombe said, we've actually got to use some of this money to maintain the existing BSIP routes that we've got in place already. So they've got to be carried on and funded for another year. Then I suppose, and Alan Peters a better man at bus funding than me, unless I can calculate in front of me. But I reckon that probably leaves you with that 2 million when you've paid for what you've actually got to keep going in the service level. So you've got agreements with First Group already, and any other operator that may be in the legal framework, like the park and ride, which is obviously with Stagecoach. So it's not huge sums of money. I'm just being realistic. And Wecker only got 13.5 and North Somerset 4. And we went through a flow chart, Rosa, didn't we? Actually looking at what we could spend on it, North Somerset. Doesn't buy you many bus services, 4.5 million. So I don't want to raise expectations through the roof. The one thing I will say on Yeovil, I believe that money that Angela Rayner's given Somerset for the regeneration of Yeovil includes some bus facilities. So I don't think we have to raid the BSIP grant to do that. But I very much agree with the approach, but start what you've got, build on that. Certainly our Colfords are well known, and with Eliscombe, those are ones I would go for. Certainly sorting out links to Midsummer Norton, but then you need, Peter, probably to make sure they got a link for jobs and work and employment in Bath, because that's where the people at Colford go to work. They change. Whether it should be a through bus to Bath again, I don't know. But there's some big debate, because obviously the D2X has been quite successful through Meld and Ridlington from Frome and into Bath. Maybe we should look at that option. But yeah, bearing in mind that we do have to work with the other authorities, and that's more to do with Labour's thinking on regional government and regionalisation than so it's hitting the boxes. But I think the conversation on the Bridport, I use it. My family's down there. Bridport to Yeovil link, very important, but it will need sign off by Dorset, and of course some of this will also go via the Peninsula. As long as it remains the Peninsula Transport Board and Western Gateway, to look at some of the coordination across the region. We mustn't forget the Falcon, of course, which Megabus no longer run, but that is actually funded by 4 authorities, Peter, to make it run through Somerset and Bristol. Thanks. That's all I'll say.
Thank you. Let's hear what Alan Peters has to say.
I agree.
I don't want to be critical, and I don't aim to be critical. Let me make this clear, but I keep seeing this desire to have improved services to Castle Cary Station, and you said in your presentation that Castle Cary bus services to Castle Cary aren't fit for purpose. I have to be honest, with the exception of 1 week a year, rail services to Castle Cary aren't fit for purpose either. And Glastonbury Wells Street have got a 30-minute frequency bus to Temple Meads, where they can get anywhere in the country by train. Whereas compared to the 4 trains a day from Castle Cary, the only place that you'd be quicker going to Castle Cary is if you're going to Weymouth, to be perfectly honest, and but that's a personal view. But having said that, Castle Cary is badly served by buses in the first place, the town of Castle Cary. The service 1 years ago was hourly and quite a worthwhile route. Now it's hanging on by its fingernails, sort of thing. I was interested in your comments about an all-operator ticket, similar to the rider tickets. I wanted to point out the rider tickets, which I'm vice chairman and I've been ever since it was invented at Wiboa. The rider tickets are available all day, including the peak hours. They were an operator-led agreement, and in honesty, I don't see why First, who led the agreement to get Wiboa, which creates the rider tickets, won't lead an agreement to get a Somerset ticket. And I know it was First West of England compared to First Southwest, or whatever they call themselves this week. And I think, in honesty, at the time, and I'm not sure now, but at the time, First West of England management were far more proactive. Of course, we had, at the time, we had Mark
James
Reddy.
Freeman.
No,
James
it was before James Freeman's time. It was Mark Reddy actually set it up. And that was in protection of not getting Avon at the time, who wanted to set up a ticket which we would have no control over. So now we've got a ticket that we've got control over, and all operators are involved with it. Going on to the Taunton situation, I think under BSIP in the first round, all counties had to prove something in order to get an award in the second round.
Yeah.
And in honesty, Somerset were probably right to concentrate on Taunton, because they produce something that can be seen to be of advantage.
And everybody agreed with that.
Mm.
It was openly stated that they needed to be able to demonstrate that investing money in at least one part of Somerset would deliver rewards, and if we delivered the rewards, then we would get a lot more money. So yes.
And the idea of investing more in Yeovil, which is bus service wise, as long back as I can remember, has been appalling. You know, that I used to quote to people, well, you know, you're lucky you're not in Yeovil. They all finish at 5:30, and you know, you don't see a bus after that. So I think, and like David says, maybe the prices you've got may be a little bit cheap for what you're seeking, and it might be better to provide more for more targeted things.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you, Alan. Susan.
Oh, thank you. I wanted to add some things to what Alan was saying about Castle Carey. I because the government have now sat on the extra railway station past Castle Carey, there's all the more reason to keep going with the buses in order to get people to Carey. So I'm in agreement with the Glastonbury one, but what he was saying about the number one service is 100% I agree. I must say that on Saturday, all through the storms, 4-hourly bus service, I tracked the bus and it made good time every single journey, which was unbelievable. I even sent an email to Southwest Coaches saying, congratulations, that was fantastic. Whether they had any passengers that day, I haven't a clue. But last week and this week, the service, you can't call it service, it's been appalling again. The kids needing the two buses to actually get to school, it's just been a nightmare. And to be honest, I wouldn't bother getting on the bus at the moment because they're breaking down. They're having wing mirrors knocked off or something, and then it's on a 2-hourly service. You cannot be 1 hour late. People were going to school, they're going to work. You cannot expect them to get on these buses. If it was an hourly service and people knew that they could get from A to B, and if there was a delay, they got the next bus in another hour. It wouldn't be quite so bad. But I noticed that there's no provision for it in your plans to enhance the number one service. And actually, the only other thing I was going to say is, perhaps I'm being naive, but I'm going to an event on Saturday, a Christmas sale, and I was going to ask people what they wanted from this new extra money, whether they wanted like evening services, Sunday services, more frequency, whatever, and just try and make notes of what people wanted. But I don't think I can sell it to them, to be honest.
Okay, Susan.
Thank you.
Jeremy Toy. Where are you from, Jeremy? And you're on mute. Sorry, you're on mute at the moment. You're still on mute, Jeremy. There we are.
There we are. Excuse me. Yes, I'm from Ninehead, near Wellington. It's possible our village has never had a bus service in living memory, but that's where I want to start from. I'm wondering, listening to everybody with talking about Somerset. Somerset's just too big, and so there are worthy cases everywhere. But if we only concentrate on the main areas, then we'll be risking being like Beeching and cutting all the branch lines and then find that people can't get anywhere. I wonder if it might be a way of resolving it to create packages, if you like, of money for a small rural areas, one for main routes and one for intercity routes, if you like. The money is not enough for any of those things, but It's very pleasing to see the Wiveliscombe to Wellington service being mentioned, and that's already been praised. That would be an opening up. The way I would see it in rural areas is perhaps to consider linkages to other services which already exist. Slinky, WiviLink in Wiveliscombe, and work on, as our bus groups here are, on linking in with timetables so that people don't have to stand around at a bus stop for an hour waiting for the link. Those sort of things might not cost very much money, but they could be organized, and that might bring in smaller operators who might not get involved in franchising and larger things, but would be willing and able to provide those services. Just those thoughts, so that people don't feel that, oh, it's all very well for X, Taunton, whatever. I'm reminded of somebody in Hulse, which also hasn't had a bus service for a long time, where a woman said, I'm very pleased to have a bus pass. All I need now is a bus. So I hope that we can get some movement there without taking anything away from anybody else through working with what exists already. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Interesting thoughts. Two final thoughts, and then I think we call it a day. Janet. You're on mute, Janet, at the moment. You're still on mute, Janet. There we are.
Thank you. I live in Bridgewater, and the 21 bus service between Taunton, Bridgewater, and Burnham. The regular thing on weekday afternoons is they cut one or two buses of the 21 or the 21As, and I've been told by drivers it's because it's the shift change time for Somerset Passenger Solutions, and the drivers are being taken away from the ordinary bus services and put onto the to the Hinkley Point runs, because their contract, if they don't do it, they get fined.
I hadn't heard that explanation, but I do know that the 21 service is one of the most problematic in Somerset in terms of reliability. I will, because we have regular meetings with First South management, and I got my next one on Monday, I will raise that specific point with First South management, see what they have to say.
Another thing that happens is one of the buses from Taunton, it goes to Richard Hewish to pick up. So it goes from the bus station straight up to Richard Hewish, but then doesn't come to the Primark bus stop, but you see it go across the traffic lights at just past Primark, down East Street. It misses out that bus stop every day nearly, because it's pick kids from Richard Hewish.
Right.
Peter.
Yep.
Thank
you.
It is Paul.
Sorry, who's speaking?
Paul.
Paul. Yes, Paul.
One thing, Ninehead, I've just checked while you were talking, had five buses a day in 1963. Each way, between Tiverton and Taunton. Now, a couple of things. I like that about the service one. That really could do with an improvement on a Saturday, because if you live in Castle Carey, it only allows you to either have one, and you can either stop in the Oval for half an hour or 4 hours, and that's your choice, and that's it. Whereas in the week, it's every 2 hours.
Right, Paul.
And Castle Carey Station, which our friend from Frome mentioned, it has very nearly an hourly train service at certain times of the day to Taunton, Exeter, and also Paddington as well. So it's quite well served. In fact, that much so that the car park has been extended no end.
Yep. With a nice cafe as well, so I'm told.
Yes.
Thank
Last
you.
one before I go.
Yep.
Well, that's a couple of things. The 47, the CR route, Bridport to Yeovil.
Yeah, 6. Yeah.
Yeah. I still say that should go back to what the 47 was years ago, which was Monday to Saturday, which is very similar to what runs today, but it worked perfectly, and people could move around, but it was altered to fit in with local passengers between Bridport and what's the name of the place just up between Bridport and here? Forgot the name of it.
Sherborne, is this?
No, where
there you're on about?
Where Doc Martin lives in real life.
God.
Can't think of.
Surely somebody knows on this call.
It's just south of Broad-Windsor. Beminster. That's it. Beminster. Yeah. That timetable is worked around the local needs of Beminster.
I wondered if it was Beminster.
Right. And finally, going back a few years, Stagecoach used to operate a route from Taunton, which was 99 at the time, Taunton to Yeovil via Crewkerne, and that proved to be quite successful, but it required a bit of subsidy from the council. And when Somerset had the cut, sort of, was it about 2010, 11? That was one of the services which was chopped.
Yeah.
And I just thought of one last one. Shepton Mallet to Broome doesn't run on a Saturday, and being a supporter of the East Somerset Railway, it's a disaster for them, that is.
Yeah. Thanks. Thank you, Paul. Finally, we'll go to Rosa. Rosa.
Thank you. I hope I'm not the final caller, but if I am, I'll make it quick. I want to make a couple of corrections. Thank you, David Redwell, for lauding me so well today. I do get around as much as I can in the Wecker territory, North Somerset, and as far afield as Wiltshire I've been recently, and into the depth of South Somerset, into Minehead and Watchet, and way over into that area of the country. I've learned a lot about Somerset this year that I didn't know before. Yes, it's very important that we link with our neighbouring communities, and we as bus champions stay in touch with those councillors who are responsible for transport in those areas. They need to know the feelings of the villages which are disconnected and want to be connected. Jeremy and Paul, both of you at Minehead, I hope you guys have joined the Minehead bus user group and are members of that, because I will be seeing a lot more of you guys next year. We've got to do something a lot more positives, and I understand how disconnected you are there. Janet in Bridgewater, I think I've met you. I'm not quite sure. I've certainly seen you on another meeting somewhere. But David Redwell, you've made the comment that franchise is requiring the Transport Authority to purchase all bus stations, bus depots, and buses and infrastructure. That is not necessarily so with the new franchising authorities that the government is working on, I understand. There are different models of franchising, and they are not all required to purchase the infrastructure. So Somerset could do it, controlling the networks and the tenders without having to purchase the actual capital stuff. So there are ways of working around it. The other correction, I think, is you, Peter. You said that Colesford is the largest parish in Somerset. I'm sorry to correct you there. St Cuthbert Out, surrounding Wells, has 12 parishes in it, and it's definitely the larger because I represent them, so I know well. Guys, it's lovely to see as many as you here. Get in touch. let us know what you want for your buses. I'll let Peter to do the summing up. We've got a very, very busy year coming up, leading up to April and the whole of next year. We've got to keep the people engaged. We need them to travel on the buses. We need them to be interested in the buses. And people must recognize that buses are not just for old people or disabled people or those people that don't have jobs. Buses are a community necessity to engage communities, work, education, all sorts of leisure facilities to get children, young adults away from their parents' taxi service. And also, of course, for our zero emissions, reduce traffic congestion, reduce the traffic emissions. The cars are about, I think it's about 40% of all the problems that we have within Somerset. So, but we need to campaign for more money for Somerset. Central government, transport, DFT, Treasury, whatever. We've got to keep our MPs engaged. And there is a small cake, and it's going to get tighter in the next, because all the local authorities are saying they're about to call 114 in. We're all in trouble. We've got to cut our belts, but we've got to make sure that the essentials transport, public transport, is not cut off, because that cuts off the vulnerable people first and the lower paid people first, and they're the ones who need them most. Well, we all need them, but they need them most, so we must make sure we keep them. And we've got to think ahead. 3 years, 5 years, 20 years. There's no point just thinking, oh, we want to keep this bus this month or this next 12 months. We want to keep them permanently.
Thanks, Rosa.
Sorry about that.
Peter, can I just say that Somerset Council have signed an agreement? Make it clear tonight, because it's no disillusioning people. Somerset Council have agreed with Dorset and Wiltshire to go for a combined authority. They've made a proposal, including a mayor. They're going to hand the transport powers to that authority. It's not going back to Somerset, Little Somerset Unitary. That is Labour. We've elected Labour government for 4 years. There's a consultation paper and a white paper due out. Please take part in it. We are not going back to a Tory-run local small Somerset. It's where we're going. You announced it in the beginning. Franchising or enhanced quality partnerships is what we have. But please remember, you have a Labour government in London and a Secretary of State based in Swindon. And it will be Wecker or it will be Wessex. And there's some choices, but it's not going to be Somerset running public transport in the future. Devon and Torbay have got the first deal, and Cornwall. Watch this space. I'm sorry to come back. It's very, very important for me to understand on the call. That's all.
Thanks, David. I think we have to take it step by step. What we do have is 150 bus champions, 12 bus groups, and clearly from this call, something like 30 very active, interested people who've managed to stick with us for 90 minutes of what's not been an easy call to listen to, but hopefully it's been informative. We have real enthusiasts. Rosa Kell, who leads our Wells bus group, has probably been to at least a third, if not more, of our bus stalls around Somerset. And as someone said from Minehead, and I live in Road, so we're at opposite ends of Somerset, that's more than a 90-minute drive, let alone trying to do it by public transport. We live in a huge county and one that's faced with big challenges, but where buses need to play a bigger part and we need to have better bus connections. Franchising, one could imagine and one must hope, will offer that. The Labour government wants franchising, whether it's with Wecker or with it, as David's pointed out, the Wessex Authority, only time will tell. I rather think the better prospects are with Wecker, with a new mayor, different approach. But time will tell. What we need to do is to start this debate about franchising within Somerset. You've all got local unitary councillors. You need to raise it with them. We're raising it with each of the MPs who are very responsive to our calls for action, for more money for Somerset, franchising in Somerset. Let us get campaigning in 2025. It's a year of opportunity, year of challenges, but a year of opportunity. And I hope to meet some of you face to face as opposed to always doing it via Zoom. But thank you for your time this evening. Thank you very much. And go and now have a really good Christmas. Celebrate. It's been a tough year. We've got through to the end of it, and hopefully, despite Donald Trump, 2025 will be an even better year. Thank you very, very much to you all.
Thanks,
Thank
Peter.
you for coming,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Good night. Happy Christmas.
Happy Christmas, everyone. Happy
Thank
Christmas.
you. Enjoy the holidays.
Yes, thank you.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everybody. Going to close the meeting now.